what's up, and welcome to the No Bullshit Manifestation Show. I'm your host, Kat Kozad, manifestation expert, money mindset and fulfillment coach, and multiple six-figure entrepreneur. Come sit with me while I spill the real tea on what it's like to practice using intentional manifestation, demystify all of the woo-woo and confusing bullshit that comes along with creating the life of your dreams, and give you a realistic view of what it's like to be on a personal, spiritual, and professional growth journey. The goal of this podcast is to support and guide you towards manifesting all of your dreams, shed light on the things that people are too scared to talk about, and encourage you to become the person who gets to have it all, be it all, and do it all. I am so happy you are here. Let's fucking do this thing. What is up, lovely soul who is listening to today's episode of the podcast? I am so excited that you're here, and I know that I say that every single podcast episode, that I am so excited that you're here, and I'm so excited for you to listen to this, but it's because it's true, one, and two, because today's podcast episode is really fucking special to me for many reasons. One, I have one of my past mentors coming onto the podcast to have a conversation about the feminine and masculine energy for all of you listening. His name is Chris Marhefka, and we're going to get into Chris's story in just a minute. But second reason is because, just like I said, we're talking about the dynamic between the feminine and the masculine energy. And this has been such a massive piece of my inner work journey and of my growth over the past year specifically. I'd say honestly, the past 10 months. Understanding the dynamic of the feminine and masculine energy together, how we embody the feminine and the masculine energy inside of ourselves, and what can happen when you have a wounded feminine energy or a wounded masculine energy, which I had both of those inside of myself, and really coming into this place of healing the feminine energy, healing the masculine energy inside of myself to allow myself to be more feminine and to use my masculine energy in the ways that are going to serve me best. So little context on that, and I can definitely do a full podcast episode about this because I think that it would be really powerful to do so. So if y'all are interested in hearing about my journey with the feminine and masculine energy and understanding how to own my feminine energy and take away my masculine mask, let me know. Send me a message on Instagram because I would love to share that story with y'all if that is something that you're interested in hearing. So yeah, shoot me a message on Instagram if that's something that you want to hear. But to give you a little bit of a context for this episode specifically, when I really started to understand what the feminine and masculine energy was, I was in a very challenging position in my life. And this is exactly when Chris, today's guest for the podcast, came into my life. I was sexually assaulted by a driver that was supposed to be taking me home after a party. And this event rocked my world. I was in just such a challenging mindset. Physically, I felt so violated. Emotionally, I felt scared and all over the place and not knowing how to express or understand what had happened. So I did a lot of repressing it, and I did a lot of putting up a masculine mask, which means like putting up a strong front, like untouchable, independent, don't fuck with me kind of mask that was to try and protect me from this experience, as well as really recognizing that I had a challenging relationship or distrust in the masculine energy, quote unquote masculine energy, specifically within men, due to many past circumstances that happened in my upbringing that led to a subconscious distrust in the masculine energy. So after this event happened, I was definitely in a place where I was needing support, didn't know how to really work through this experience on my own, and found Chris and his business, TCS, Training Camp for the Soul, and decided to enroll in their mentorship and their program that facilitates healing. And oh my gosh, the healing, the grieving, the uprooting of past beliefs, the releasing of emotion and energy and trauma that happened for me inside of this program is beyond words. It was one of the most incredible mentorships and training programs that I have been a part of to this day. And Chris is going to give us some more information on that inside of the podcast episode. But essentially, this experience allowed me to really start to understand the dynamic between the feminine and the masculine energy, my own feminine and masculine energy, and how that relates to the dating world and relationships, and finding, or not finding, but attracting the partner that is going to meet you at the level of femininity or masculinity that you are emitting out and what you are wanting to receive, or in some cases, what you're pushing away because you are either too far in the feminine or too far in the masculine. But we're going to get into that inside of this episode. So with this little intro to the episode, why it's so special to me, why I'm so excited for y'all to listen to it today. Like I said, we have one of my past mentors, Mr. Chris Marhefka, coming onto the show today to chat about the dynamic between the feminine and masculine energy, his journey, codependency, co-creation, what the masculine wants and needs, how to help the masculine men in your life win and want to continue to show up for you. This episode is so fucking juicy and so sexy. Not only is Chris's voice so sexy, and you will hear that, and Chris, if you are listening to this, don't know if I'm allowed to say that as one of your past mentees, but damn, your voice is sexy. And all of the information that he gave to us in this episode is so sexy. So Mr. Chris Marhefka facilitates transformation by opening hearts, expanding minds, and giving people permission to be their most authentic self. He creates life-changing experiences in emotional healing, inner child healing, somatic experiencing, breathwork, masculine embodiment, relationship and communication coaching, men's development, and leadership mentoring. This man is fucking incredible. So Chris is the CEO and Facilitator at Training Camp for the Soul and the founder and facilitator of the Embodied Man community and retreats. And Chris came into this work after years of being on a completely different path and doing his own healing work, getting to this place within himself to now be able to be the absolutely incredible facilitator, teacher, healer, mentor that he is. And I can't speak highly enough of this man. He is absolutely incredible and has been such an impactful part of my journey. So I really hope that y'all enjoy today's episode. And without a further ado, here is Chris. Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the No Bullshit Manifestation Show. Today, I have a very special guest on the show, one of my old mentors. Chris is here to chat with us today about the feminine and the masculine energy and what he does as a leader, as a coach, as a healer, and just the incredible journey that he's been on and what he helps others with. So, Chris, welcome onto the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kat. I'm excited to be here and excited to chat with you.
Yeah, cool. So to kick this thing off, I would love for you to share with us your journey. What has led you to being this fully embodied masculine man and doing the work that you do for the people in your life?
Mhm. Yeah, I always love to start with where I'm at today. And like you shared, I'm facilitating some deep healing work with Training Camp for the Soul, which you're familiar with. And went through my own personal journey. And that's really the how I got here. And the why I got here was because I followed the script that I was told would lead to a great successful life. And I by the time I was 30 years old, I had checked all of those boxes. I had the house, I had the community, I'd built a few businesses, I was married, on the way to starting a family, and I had been setting all these goals since I graduated college. And so for 10 years, I'd been checking these boxes and checking these boxes. And it was actually right around my 30th birthday when I went to set goals again. You know, something about birthdays, it's like a turning over of a new leaf and a new chapter. Same thing people do around New Year's is it caused me to reflect. And I was setting these goals, and there was just a moment where I was like, is this it? And that it was, okay, is it just put another zero in the bank account? Is it just add more achievements? Is it continue to go down this path of just pushing myself to achieve more just for the purposes of achievement? Because at that point, like I said, I had everything. I had all the material things and the toys and the money, and I wasn't truly happy. And so um, it wasn't that the things I was doing up to that point were wrong. They were actually what I wanted to be doing, or what I thought I wanted to be doing. Back then, I was running. I'd owned a gym for over 10 years. I was in the fitness and nutrition and the personal development space as a coach, and I was helping people, which was what I knew I was on this planet to do. And I went into all of those things for the right reasons, but I got to the point to where who I was living my life as didn't feel like me anymore. It felt like someone else's story. And that was the moment that really shifted for me, where I started going deeper into my, call it, development work or inner work. And that led me to Training Camp for the Soul. I became a client first. I went through the program with Anat, who's now my business partner, and changed my life. Changed my life to what I actually truly wanted my life to be, and not just the life that I was taught to want. And I'm sure we'll go more into that because I think many people are going through that, where they're following the rules, quote unquote, the rules of the way things should be in their mind, and they're not truly fulfilled. And that journey had so many ups and downs from when I started the program in January 2019 to today. I've gone through many different iterations of pieces of my identity having to die and fall away and let go of, so that I could create the new. And in that process, I went through lots of inner healing, inner masculine healing, inner feminine healing, which I know we'll talk about, and and then also like my own journey to finding my own needs, my core. And I keep pointing to my center of my chest, my heart, because that's where I believe like our true soul lives. It's the seat of the soul, and it's where our true desires are, and our higher self lives. And I hadn't had access to that before. And so now that I had access after doing this program, I started making changes in my life, and then things just started coming easier and easier the more I got in alignment with my heart, life started changing. So now I live where I want to live, dating an amazing woman that is perfect for me. I have the career that I desire, helping people, financially successful, and everything that in this moment I truly deeply desire, I have. And it feels so great to say that and celebrate that, because even though I had checked all the boxes just a few years ago, I couldn't say all those things. I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't happy. So that's where I'm at. And the story to get there had a lot of ups and downs along the way. It wasn't like all sunshine and rainbows by any means. I had definitely had my dark nights of the soul, and I had my struggles and my challenges, and we can talk about any of those personal stories you want to dive into. But it, I like to share both the good and the celebrations along with the challenges, because I think both of them are really valuable depending on where people are at in their journey.
Yeah.
Because I had, quote unquote, from the outside looking in, everyone said like, "Oh, what a great life. You have all these things." And so from the outside, it looked like, oh, I was living in the good, but I was just had this internal conflict that was happening, where I wasn't who I wanted to be. And so I think depending on where your listeners are, it's important to see both of those sides, that like, A, it can be incredible and amazing, but sometimes it means you have to go through a little bit of turmoil and chaos and rewriting your story to get there.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love that you bring that to the surface, because that's been so true for me in my story of checking all the boxes, following all the rules, following the prescribed path of this is what it's going to take to live this really happy, healthy, fulfilled life. And I did it. I got the car. I manifested the 6 figures in less than 10 months of my business. I was in a relationship, all of these different things. And I felt, or I experienced very similar to what you experienced of like, and I still don't feel happy. And what the fuck is wrong with me
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now? Even though those things were beautiful and it was such an incredible experience, I don't want to take away the fact that like those things were also awesome. It just was this missing piece inside of me as well, and getting closer to what those actual desires have been for me in my life. So I love that. And I completely resonate with that piece of your story. So I'm super curious to know, as you were recognizing that for yourself, that you thought all of these external things were going to make you happier, or like that was the goal of like, ultimately, when I get this, then maybe I'm going to feel the way that I wanted to feel. What do you think it was, or what was it that was actually the piece that was missing for you at that point?
Yeah. I called it fulfillment. Um, it was it was like a deeper sense of purpose in this world. Like there was something that was like eating away at me inside that I wasn't being, that it felt like I was not being true to myself. And so it was like some sort of like inauthentic, unfulfilled experience. And that what went along with that, or what was like the effect of that, was on the surface level, I wasn't ever truly happy. I wasn't ever truly like in love with my life or joyful. And I didn't really even realize it because I had a lot of surface happiness. I was traveling, like I was like hitting the goals and getting achievements. And so like those brought some level of like surface comfort and enjoyment with my life. But it was it only had, like, I only touched it when I gave myself enough time, space, and permission to go one layer deeper. And the one layer deeper was just like past this like a logical mind, where my logical mind was saying, "You're doing great. Like everything's great. Everything's great. Everything's great." Literally every time someone asked me, "How you doing?" "I'm doing great. I'm doing great." It was always that answer, because on the logical surface that was true. But anytime I gave myself permission to just go like one layer deeper, maybe it was like in a journaling practice, or maybe it was just when I sat down to reflect on the last year, like I did every birthday. And every time I would do that, there was just like that little piece missing, where I couldn't actually put words to the material thing of what it was, because they had all the material things, all the surface things. And so that's why it was actually confusing for me. It was confusing and frustrating. The words that you said, I would say to myself all the time, the what the fuck is wrong with me? I have all these things. What the fuck is wrong with me? And it was that like internal like conflict battle that was happening where I couldn't figure it out. And so I got more frustrated. And that was the period, like from the moment where I realized like something was missing at around 30 to 32, when I finally had my, what I call my emotional rock bottom, my dark night of the soul, which was right before my 32nd birthday. And then months before I did training camp for the soul. It was like those 2 years where I started to um, go from like things are great to like, things aren't great. And this was all internal. Things aren't great. And so I would start like uh, breaking and self-sabotaging my life because there was something like there was this like clashing of like what I was doing on the outside and what was happening on the inside. And so like over those 2 year period, like it was a lot of pain and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of like breaking things and challenging my reality that I was living. And had I been less stubborn, I'm sure I would have taken some help sooner or like found the right person to support me through the sooner. But I was really stubborn. I was, and some people would call that determined or tenacious. And those are all really good qualities, but I just kept putting my head down. I kept pushing. And it wasn't until like I had enough pain for me where my body was physically broken at that point. My mind was just worn out. I was working 80, 100-hour work weeks and constantly stressed. And then emotionally, finally the emotions got big enough to where they got overwhelming for me, because I had gotten really good up until that point at suppressing them and just like pushing them aside just to keep going and keep living that like masculine doing life. But finally, everything just kind of bubbled up at around the same time. I had this breakdown moment where I was driving home from a trip with my wife at the time, and we crossed the border from Georgia to Florida to drive home. I lived in Florida at the time, and I had this realization when I saw the welcome to Florida sign. I was like, oh shit, I don't actually want to go home to this life that I created. And there's just this moment where I was like, I just want to turn around and go anywhere but there, just because it doesn't feel like me. And I broke down crying. I pulled off on the side of the road, and my wife at the time, I acknowledge her and give her so much credit, because she was able to hold me for the first time in our relationship, in me like fully breaking down in my emotions and like finally feeling what was always there. And she was so calm, so loving. And at the time, she was finishing up this program, Training Camp for the Soul. And I was seeing all of her changes, and I was seeing her be happier. And it was like such a clear, like flashing billboard. It was like, go do this thing. I was so stubborn. I was so resistant to it because I didn't understand it, but it was very clear. It was finally like enough pain for me to say, let's go, let's change something. Let's look at this problem differently than me just trying to figure it out in my logical mind. And that was a big step for me, because up until that point, like everything had to make sense for me. It was linear. It was like, okay, I can connect from A to B. I come up with the answers. I control my life. But really, I had no control. It was just like, it was artificial. It was made up. And so that was the moment where it was like, okay, it's time to raise the white flag, throw up the hands, and admit that maybe I don't know. Like maybe I don't know what the problem is. Maybe I don't know what the next step is. And maybe it's okay to be supported in finding that out for myself.
Absolutely. So much power in that. And I can only imagine how challenging it is as a masculine man in our very masculine society to be able to embrace and understand those emotions and following a path that is more heart aligned than just following the prescribed path and following what it means to be successful and hustle and create something for yourself. So I'm super curious in like your own words and like definition, like what is the difference between having like wounded masculine energy versus having like divine masculine energy?
Yeah, the way that I describe, I try to simplify everything to like like elementary school language, and it's if the energy of the masculine is harming yourself or others, it's wounded or toxic or whatever, unhealthy. If it's helping others or yourself, it's healthy. It's
Mhm.
divine. The energy itself isn't the problem. It's what that energy is being directed towards. The energy of the masculine is it's very powerful. It's very needed in this world. It's very needed for all of us individually. We all carry both the masculine and feminine. The I think the challenge that most people are going through is that that energy is being directed towards things that aren't actually supportive of ourselves. They're not supportive of our health, of our families, of our communities, of our earth, of our well-being, and of others as well. Most people see examples of that masculine energy being directed towards harming people, either physically, emotionally, mentally, harming the environment, or using people as resources for your own personal gain. That's what most people's experience is of the masculine energy. And yeah, that is masculine energy, but it's coming from a place of, like you said, from wounding, from harming other people to get ahead. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of us are taught, both men and women. We're taught that you got to be competitive, and you got to like step on a few like step on a few heads to like get ahead. Like you're literally in direct competition with other people, and you have to use people and manipulate and to get your way. You have to be powerful or assertive or whatever the words you want to use are. And it's actually not true. It's not true, but we're taught to believe that it's true. And so everyone's kind of playing this similar game where we're using all of this powerful masculine energy, but it's not actually serving anyone. It's not serving us, and it's not serving the people around us. Um, so that's how I would define it. It's it's the it, most of our world that we live in, at least in the United States, is, like you said, it's so highly masculine. It's so doing focused. It's so achievement focused. It's so force focused. It's like forcing your way through life, forcing your way through business, forcing your way through any activity or relationship or conflict. It's this very like um, solve the problem to get to the end and then solve the next problem. And even the way that we look at life, it's very masculine. You do this plan, and this is the way you do it, and then you put your head down, and then maybe one day you get to enjoy it. That was my script. It was like at 65 you retire, and then you get to enjoy life a little bit. But life is suffering, so I was creating suffering in my life, and that was my story.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It it is. It's so true. Everything that you're saying is like, especially America or like any Western cultures, is so do focus, masculine focus, which I recognize with the work that I do and the women that I work with, is that it's created a lot of like hyper independent women and women who are very, very much so in their masculine, and can be super challenging for them then wanting to attract and manifest the masculine man that
Yeah.
they want in their life. And I can speak from my own personal experience on this. I have driven away every boyfriend that I had until really doing work on my feminine and masculine energy inside of myself, because I was essentially like emasculating the men in my life because I was taught that I had to provide for myself, that I had to be a independent, strong woman who didn't need no man.
Right.
And it was an energy that was not attracting in or attracting in another masculine partner, but essentially pushing him away because I wasn't allowing him to be in his masculine. So, my question for you is like, What do you notice with like the men that you work with or the women that you work with who experience these imbalances in their feminine and masculine energy?
Yeah, such a great point. And what came to me was that like that journey is completely okay, that people are in that experience right now. That's the first thing I want to share. It's actually very predictable stage of development where we go from codependency, where we literally are dependent on others to survive and live, which is literally from the time we're born. And we have to go through independence. We have to know that we can take care of ourselves. We can hold ourselves and our emotions. This is the masculine, the holding of ourselves, the providing and the protecting for ourselves. That needs to happen if we want to get to true co-creation with another, a divine relationship that is um, being met in the ways that you want to be met in. And this can be business relationships, friendships, romantic partnerships. But to get to that true co-creation with another person, both people have to have transcended codependency into independence to then transcend into co-creation. So it's great that people are learning how to take care of themselves, because you can't skip that step. You can't be fully codependent in any way and then skip to co-creation and expect that that's going to be able to happen, because there's still parts of you that you don't know how to hold for yourself. And this can be for anyone. It can be like the idea of providing for yourself in your material ways, like financially or home or food or whatever. It could be in love, in learning how to independently love yourself first or accept yourself. If you don't go through that process, you're still going to be in the codependency stage where you're requiring someone else to fill that for you. So that's the first thing I share is like, great that you're in that, but know that like independence, if you want a co-creation environment, independence isn't the last step. It's just a step on the journey towards that. And so it's great. Honestly, I think that we could do a better job of pushing people into independence sooner. And the people you're talking to, I imagine they're already there, and so they're doing those things. The next step requires letting go, though, of a lot of the things that you have learned to own for yourself, letting go and letting someone in to experience and hold you in things that you've learned how to do for yourself. So like simple surface examples, like allowing, like you were talking about male partner and you driving them away, like allowing a partner or yourself to do something for someone that they clearly know how to do. Like I know how to do the dishes, but my partner did all the dishes and she made the bed. Like I know how to do all those things. And when you can allow them to give that and then fully receive it and not like keep a scoreboard of who's doing what and who's like, that's codependency is when you're keeping a scoreboard and you're like only doing something so that you get something in return. So when you can start to allow and this is the feminine part, when you can allow someone to give to you and like fully receive it just as is, just like really like thank you, and that's it, period, end of sentence. The next moment, that didn't happen, it didn't exist. It's just another moment where there gets to be another transaction of giving and receiving. It requires people to get uncomfortable again, the same way it's uncomfortable to go from codependence to independence, but in a different way, because that one, you're taking ownership of yourself, you're taking ownership of your life, you're taking responsibility. The next one is actually you're letting go a little bit, you're softening a little bit, you're receiving, you're letting go of needing everything to be your way and trusting that, or and trusting another person. So it's a different process. And if you're only in the mindset of like the independence control, then it's going to be hard to shift to that co-creation. And when it comes to both men and women, we're highly conditioned, especially in the world that you and I live in of personal development. People are like go-getters, they're achieving. It's a little bit harder to shift that mindset because we've been conditioned for life to go, 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 and to achieve, achieve, achieve. Um, and yeah, I see that the challenge for the men is definitely different from the women. The women oftentimes is if they desire to be more in their feminine. And I'll say everyone has a natural essence of and you can almost like tell by someone's behaviors in their body when they're truly being themselves. They have a natural essence on the spectrum of masculine and feminine, and then they have a conditioned being, a conditioned behavior. And so the further apart those things are, the more discomfort that person will be in, or the harder their life will be. And so I believe the ultimate goal is to get as much in alignment with what your natural essence is. So like if you were going from like 0 to 100 on that scale, some people are like 90 on the feminine scale. And so you likely need to attract a partner that's 90 on the masculine scale.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are more like 40 and 40, or even 20 and 20. They're more balanced. And there's no right or wrong. It's just like acknowledging like where you want to live. And so if you're living in a highly masculine way, but your desire and your natural essence is highly feminine, there's going to be a lot of turmoil. Your life is going to feel hard. You're going to feel like it's always out of alignment and really just uncomfortable. So the more we can get those in alignment, the better. Now, for women that want to be more in their feminine, that are currently in their masculine, that means more softening. That means more being in their emotional body. That means learning to feel their feelings. And the big difference, I say this very often, is there's a big difference between expressing your emotions and being witnessed in them and projecting your emotions on another person. The first is ownership and responsibility of your emotions and just the capacity to hold yourself in them while being witnessed in another. The second is just another version of codependency. You're just like projecting all your shit onto another person and hoping that they can hold it for you because you don't know how to hold it yourself. And so when you're going through this process of like going back into your feminine, it requires you to still hold yourself while you're learning to allow and trust another to hold you in the process. So one mistake that I see a lot of women make, that when they come to this realization, is that they just completely throw their hands up and they're like, I'm in my feminine now. Yeah. And then they expect every single man to like know what that means to hold you individually, because every person is different. And so it takes like a dance and a flow, and it takes a woman saying that like, hey, when you did this, like I felt this, and this is what I would like going forward. And what that does is that gives the man to show up in his masculine and win for you. And this is the challenge of men, is that men just want to win. Like they want to win in the world. They want to win with the woman in their life and their families, and they just want to win. But if they're constantly told they're wrong and they're constantly told they're failing, they're going to stop playing that game eventually. They're like, fuck that. I'm going to go find a different game where I can win at. So if the women are constantly just beating the men down and emasculating them, they're like, fuck this. Like, I don't need this. I'm like, and that's where the different challenges come. And that's honestly how most of our men were raised, where men were just boxed in. It was like, know this, you're doing this wrong, you're this, and you're just boxed in and boxed in and boxed in. And what it creates is this pressure cooker inside all of these men. And then they just continue experiencing it through adulthood, and they just keep contracting down. And they keep until they explode one day. It's like a pressurized bottle, and then one day the cap blows off and they blow off their partner or their kids or at work, or maybe even worse, they're violent or they do something to another human. But it's just a product of, we're not giving the men permission to just mess up a little bit and just be like, hey, this is what I would like differently. You're not wrong for doing it this way. But like, this is what I would like. And that's where that relationship gets to be a dance when you're attracting and learning with your partner is you have to communicate your experience and what you want and need from a place of love and not from a place of judgment. It's really hard to do. You have to be solid in yourself, and no one ever gets it perfect. But as much as you can be calm and loving and invite the masculine up, the right person will show up, and they'll keep showing up if they keep getting invited up. But men don't like to be told what to do. They don't like to be losing. They don't like to be failing. And so the more we tell them they're doing those things, the more they're just going to be like, this feels terrible for me. Like I'm never winning. Like I was trying here. And so that's the general things that we see in women and men. And it's not that anyone's wrong in this situation. It's just like we're all playing out these behaviors that we learned. And it's, if we want to change that script for ourselves individually, we have to start showing up as the person we desire to be, regardless of what our external environment is right in this moment. It may take a few moments. It may take a week. It may take a year, but you have to keep showing up as the person and the being that you want to be. And eventually your external environment will attune to that. But if you can't keep showing up as, like, I'm talking to the women, as that like strong masculine, and you're never letting the man in, like you're just going to keep rejecting the men that want to show up in that role. They're like, oh shit, this role's already taken. They're taking it. So what am I going to do here? Or you may attract in more feminine men, which is the nature, the science of polarity, is like we're always attracting our opposites of how we're showing up. And so the more you as an individual can show up the way that you desire to be, the more you'll attract the person that is the equal and opposite of that. And the important part, though, is that you're showing up in your natural essence, what is most aligned for you. That's different for everyone. So the more inward you can go and the more you can discover, you don't have to define it. You don't have to put a number on it, but like, what makes you feel good? What makes you feel good in the presence of another? What is the way you want to live? And then the more you get in tune with that, and the more you start being that, regardless, the more things will show up, and it won't always look the way you think it will. Maybe you're with a partner. You're like, yeah, when I start showing up this way, they're going to start showing up this way. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe it's just like, oh, you're now more your natural self, and that attraction isn't there anymore because they were attracted to the old version of you, where it was a very different person. And so you have to be okay with letting go of some of those things of your old self if you desire to truly embody your new self. And that can be really painful. I mean, for me, that included letting go of 3 different businesses, a wife, a home, a community. Like, that was fucking painful. A lot of pieces of my identity had to go to build the one that was more authentically me. It happened faster than I thought, though. I thought it would take me 10 years to get to where I am today. It took me like 2.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And you just, first of all, thank you. Holy shit. You just dropped some mad wisdom and all of that. And there's so many different things that stood out to me as you spoke on that. First, of like that piece on independence that you shared. That is so beautifully said, in such an incredible way to see it. And how I notice things in my life is oftentimes, like you're saying, with the codependency, then coming to this place of independence, is that we have to go from one extreme to the other extreme to be able to come back to the middle. And that middle ground being this place of understanding your core, understanding where you fall on that spectrum of the desire to be in your feminine versus to be in your masculine, and that is going to be different for everyone, that there isn't a one size fits all. And really just to check in with, like, if it's creating a level of frustration the way that you are showing up, that then there's an easier way to go about it, but it may be a messy journey to figure out what that is, which I loved what you were saying on that for you and your own journey, is that like, it's been this dance to kind of figure out that flow and understand what feels good in terms of the communication, what feels like you're being hounded on and just like kind of losing in. And so a big question that I have, especially for all of the women who are listening, that really resonated with them, of like, oh shit, like I have this masculine person in my life and maybe I'm making him feel like he's losing, and I'm not inviting him to shift behaviors. I'm not inviting him to lead and be the man that I desire to have in my life. How can you encourage the masculine to lead, or encourage the masculine to be the person that you need them to be?
I love that question. And again, I'm going to answer it simply. And if you've ever, this is not to knock men, it's actually quite accurate. If you've ever trained a dog before, training the masculine is very similar to training a dog. And I mean this in the most compassionate way. We respond to praise. We want to be told that was a good job, acknowledged for this thing, and you will get more of it, and you will get more of it, and they will want to do it. They will want to show up for it. And so the first step, if you've been acting a certain way and they've been acting a certain way, there's already relationship patterns. So the first thing that needs to happen is you need to actually name those things. You need to go to them and you need to say, hey, I've been showing up this way. I realize I've been ABC, like taking this from you. And what I really want is for you to do this, to hold this, to be responsible for this. I want you to lead in this area of the role, and be specific about it. And so, and then ask them, like, how would that feel? Like if I left date night up to you and you just took care of everything, or this next vacation, or this, or whatever, and let them say yes or no. Be like, yes, that feels like something I could absolutely do. I want to do that. And then I'll also be okay with them saying no in this, like, no, and that no is probably they don't yet know how to fulfill your needs because you haven't been clear about them in the past. And so there's a fear that they'll take it and screw up. So for the women, or for the feminine, you have to be okay with being dropped in small amounts. And that's where your own inner masculine comes in, where you can always be the safety net for yourself. And that dropping is going to happen as the masculine in your life learn what the like really subtle details of what you need are. Because if they say yes and they truly like love you and want to show up and they want to win for you, they're going to try their best, but their best isn't going to necessarily line up with what your expectations of your wants are. So when they do show up, maybe it's not 100% what you want. Praise them on all of the amazing things that they did. Like, wow, it was amazing how you showed up. It was amazing how you took care of that reservation. I didn't even worry about when we were getting to this place. You had this done and this done. And like, I loved how you like opened the door from it, like whatever it is. Be specific about it. If it's something you want, be specific. And then let them know how they could win even more next time. And let them know, like, hey, when I'll use an example from myself. So in this relationship that I'm in, and it's we live in different cities, and so my frequency of communication wasn't as much as she desired. And so she would communicate like, oh, I love how when we speak on the phone, like we're so connected, you're present, like where we go. She's like, can you, I don't know what the word she used, but she's like, I would really like if it were more often. And could we do this every 2 days rather than every 3 days? And I was like, yeah, that's absolutely something I could do. And that was an example of like her just showing up lovingly with what she wanted, and me being like, oh yeah, like that just wasn't my natural cadence. I thought we were just having great conversations and it was just on that frequency. But then we started doing it every 2 days as an example. It was great. Like I loved it. I loved it, the conversations. And I know that it's what she wanted too. So it filled me up even more in that way. So you have to first be okay with like little drops along the way. That's just the dance, but you have to keep allowing them to show up. And knowing that you can always catch yourself, knowing that it may not be perfectly exact the way that you would have done it. But in the training process, mistakes have to be made. This is how all learning happens, is little mistakes have to be made that can just be course corrected, and told, explained, hey, this is how I would have liked it differently. It's great that you did it this way. I see why you did it. Awesome. And this is what I want going forward. That's it. And this, it's better to start with the smaller things, the things that are less close to home. Like don't start with like really deeply vulnerable, intimate things, because it takes practice also for the man to receive that feedback and to know that it's not like an emotional trap, like he's not being manipulated in some way to do these things. And that's the other thing. The energy behind relationships always has to come from love. If you're coming from getting right or getting your way or getting some manipulative tactic, the other person may not realize it immediately, but energetically they will notice like what's happening. And then you're literally just creating a codependent pattern between you that you're just controlling this person. And that's the part where I joke about the dog thing, but that's part where a difference from the training the dog is you're just using the affirmative and correction model to communicate what you want from them and then allowing them to be that thing. And the how long and the what mistakes are too big or too small is really up to us individually and what we want to commit to. If you're truly committed to the person and you love them as a person and you see their higher self, you see what they're capable of and of being, and you're willing to stick around for all the challenges, then go for it. And there will be times where there's some people in relationships where they'll give people chances. They won't rise. They won't respond to the feedback. They won't really put effort into it. And then you get to decide is like, okay, so for how long am I going to put up with this? I believe I'm clearly communicating. The next question is asking them, hey, was it clear what I shared with you about what I desired in this? And if it's yes, and they still didn't do it, and then it's like, okay, why? Like, why? And it may be something, a need for them. Because that's the other thing is that most of us men were taught not to have needs in relationships, especially not from our feminine partners. We were taught not to ask for them, taught to figure it out ourselves and do all these things. And so some things may be happening. It's not all about the man serving the woman or the masculine serving the feminine. Actually, I'll take that back. Sometimes the moment calls for the woman to step into her masculine to support the man in his feminine. Because again, we all carry these energies. It may not be all the time, but it will happen. And so that dance, you also have to, and I'm speaking to the woman again, you have to be ready to switch, to realize like, oh, this is a time when I need to be the one that holds while they are in their emotions, they're in their feeling. And without that, you're not actually truly in that dance. You're just in a service relationship where you're just expecting them to constantly serve you. And that's the really, that really depends on how far you guys are on the spectrum. Because like pure divine masculine, 100% on the spectrum and pure divine feminine 100%, I don't believe really exist in humans. I believe we're at least a little bit of the other one. And depending on how much that is means how often you guys have to dance back and forth between them. So for instance, maybe you absolutely want them showing up in their masculine in bed, in the sexual part of the relationship. And 100% of the time you want that. But maybe in the finances, maybe you're the responsible one. You have the knowledge there. Maybe you enjoy doing that. Maybe that's the part that you take on. Maybe around the household things, it's different. Maybe around the taking care of the kids, it's different. And these specific duties. That's why the more clear you can get about communicating your needs and how your partner can win with you, the more chance you have of that partner winning with you and fulfilling those needs that you want. And then also inviting them to do the same. And it's people that are listening to this podcast, I imagine they're pretty far along their journey and they're likely aware of a lot of things. And when it comes to two people, the person who's aware of what's happening is the one who's responsible for showing up. Unfortunately, if you're more developed in certain ways than your partner, you're responsible for showing up. You're like, oh, I see what's happening. Like, oh, I see we're playing into the old patterns. Okay, I'm going to show up as the person I desire. And that invites them into it as well. Eventually, they'll also have the awareness of like, oh, I see. Okay, so she's showing up this way. And like, it's just like a very loving way to call your partner forward rather than resenting them for not doing it, resenting them for not showing up. And so it can be a situation where something happens, they make the little mistake, and rather than making them wrong for it, you just give them like a little bit of, hey, in that moment, I felt sad that you didn't do this. And I love you so much. And next time, like, it would feel really good if you did this for me. And all of those little shifts in our language and shifts in our energy add up, and they make someone want to be around in the relationship versus you have to be around because you're my partner. It's a very different energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And truly is. It's just like that invitation, just like you said, for the masculine energy is so important because you don't want to be put in a box. You don't want to be told what to do. That level of freedom to make your own decision in the masculine energy is, from my understanding, incredibly important. So all of that is so valuable for everyone listening to know. And then on the other flip side of that, like, what are some of the things that the feminine does that like drives the masculine crazy in a good way? Like, they can't get enough of, they crave, they think is delicious. And what are some of the things that the feminine just does that masculine wants?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. It's like playful, beautiful, like the moving of her, like making art with her body, like moving her body, like teasing the masculine, calling out more intensity of him. Like, one of my we joke, I have a bit of like a lion archetype, and my feminine partner, she like purrs and like she like rubs her face on my, and it like lights me up so much. Or like we'll just be like out in public and she'll just come and like brush up against me, and like stuff like that is just like so beautiful, so playful. And or even just like a soft smile, or just like a loving embrace. Anything that is, it's like the feminine is beauty and it's art, and it's anything that's like flowy and playful, and things that take us out of like our thinking mind of like the normal day to day. Also things that call more energy out of like up in us, and she'll make like little faces, like little like growling faces, and she'll like, and I'm like, yeah. I call it just like being like really cute. And sometimes like this gets a bad rap again, but like submissive in some ways, if that's what you want in your relationship. And being opening and like really like vulnerable. Another thing that if this is a little bit more, the man will have to have more development in himself in holding, but like fully being in your emotions. Like a truly masculine man like will be able to stay present and stay with his breath and be able to hold. But the more of that like my partner reveals to me, the more it like calls my capacity out to be like, okay, yes, I'm here and I can keep holding and keep holding and keep holding. But again, the first time you do these things, like it may throw off your partner because they're not used to this behavior. Like, what is this? Or it's like, oh, this is too much. And so sometimes it helps, like I said, to name these behaviors and say like how you want to show up. Just like, hey, I want to be a little more playful with you. Like, what would feel like sexy to you or fun, or maybe I want to share more of my feeling with you. And is this a good time? Like, when would be a good time? Like, I want to express more with you. And it's almost like you're giving them a warning of what's about to happen so they can like prepare themselves, and then tell them what you want for them to support you. Again, you need to give them the instruction. So it's like, hey, I just want you to sit there. I don't need any feedback. I don't need you to solve the problem. Like, I just want to express for like 5 minutes. And we call that holding the bucket. It's actually a really intimate practice that we talk about in TCS, is just allowing your partner to be there silently, hold space, not say a word, no responses, no nothing. And then you just literally vomit into the bucket while they hold it. That's a masculine and a feminine practice. And that can go both ways too. So allowing both partners to do it is a really vulnerable and intimate experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that we've been talking about, the other thing feminine partners can do is just like it's less feminine, but you're setting yourself up for it. Is like, just tell them how they can win with you, period. Just give them the details, give them the playbook, and do it from a place of like love, compassion, understanding, and like keep inviting them forward, inviting them to bring more of that. Yeah.
I love all of those. And just to like hit it home for everybody who's listening and who embodies or identifies as that feminine energy, it doesn't have to be these like crazy grand gestures or like going and changing all of these different things about yourself to become the feminine. It's what Chris is saying of like allowing that inherently playful piece of you to come out and be seen and be adored on in its like fullest capacity, as well as like without shame or judgment, like allowing your genuine desires. Like Chris said, like if you have this desire to be submissive, to like own the fuck out of that you can be submissive, that you can be playful, that you can be kinky, that you can be all of these different things and be seen in it, because the masculine does want to hold you in that and hold that structure, that safety for you to be fully expressed, because that turns them the fuck on.
And the fully expressed turns us the fuck on for sure. And I'll share like my own personal experience was, even with all the work that I've done and how I believe I do embody that masculine, I was still afraid to really let it out, especially with someone new. And so even though I knew it was who I was, like there was a fear for me. I was like, oh, this might be too much, like too much energy, too much like dominating, or too much of this. And I want to be respectful. And like those things still came up for me. But the way that we navigate through it is I'll ask her like, hey, was that too much? Like, I was actually afraid of like hurting you. And she's like, no, more. She's like, I actually want more. And then sometimes she'll be like, yeah, that was a little too much. Like that hurt. Or like, and this isn't just physically, this could be emotionally as well, and mentally. And so it's the communication dance back and forth. The words are really the way where we can be clear that the other person understands what we're saying. But the more you do the words, the less the words are needed, because the words then like turn to the energy and they turn to the body language. And that's when you get a really like sacred dance between the two, when the words are no longer needed. But the words are needed initially, so that's how our minds process what they're actually doing,
Yeah.
especially when it's a completely new behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, okay. So question on that for you. Do you feel as though if somebody's been in a relationship where they've been with that person for a long time and they've acted within a behavior for such a long time, and then they want to start to introduce these new behaviors, do you feel as though that's something that can work? Is that something that creates more challenge? And like, I know you were saying like in your marriage, when you started to tap into what your desire was, that you two went your separate ways. So like, what has been your experience, and what do you recognize with that?
Yeah. And I think that it can, if we were going to be binary about relationship staying or relationship going,
Mm-hmm.
it can go either way. And the hardest thing that you get to do for yourself is to commit to the person you know you are and want to be, regardless of what that outcome is. If you move forward being unattached to this one person with this one face and this one name, you're much more likely to get exactly what you desire and be the person you are than if you have any attachment to it being that person. You may unconsciously manipulate your behavior away from your authentic self to fit this person's mold. And so that is it's a tough thing to do. And I don't know if we ever truly do it, because we love humans and we have investment in them with relationships. But the more you can get to that, I think, especially when you're in a transition period, like, you're a different person than the person you used to be, you have to be at least accepting that may be an outcome, that you're no longer together. And my belief is that go to the end of the road of what you can learn with this person and grow with this person before you just cut it and abandon it. The reason why is that if you cut it early, you will likely wonder what would have happened if you had communicated more. You'll also likely repeat the same patterns with the next person. And so do everything within you to show up in 100% responsibility to communicate what you want. Like, go to those uncomfortable conversations, like, be the person you want to be, and just allow them to show up and allow them to show up and allow them to show up until you get to the point to where you feel like you've exhausted your responsibility and they're not meeting you there. And that is when I would say, like, you get to make a decision if this is the person that you're going to grow with, or not, but not until that point. What happened with my relationship, and I share this very openly, is that we both grew a tremendous amount in a short amount of time. And 9 years in relationship came to the surface in a period of like 6 months. And in a very tight container, we were traveling in an RV. It was very stressful. A lot of things were coming up. We were doing a lot of growth. And so what our journey was, and just so people understand, everyone's journey is different, is like, we were in deep codependency and we weren't aware of it until we were. And then we both made commitments to not be in that. And so we both were learning how to love and hold ourselves. For me, it was more, I needed to emotionally find independence. She wanted to, like, on more of like the human way, the masculine ways, find independence, so like what it meant to take care of herself and what are all these things that Chris is doing for me, and actually like noticing them and recognizing them and being on her own. And for me, it was like, I needed her love to feel good. And so the emotional thing, like, I needed to find that in myself. And that was like us two individually. And so we paired together really well because we knew how to fit each other's codependencies. And then we became aware of it. We wanted to break that. And so for us, the separation was what we felt was needed to find ourselves individually. And we both accepted the fact that it could go either way in that binary. And there were many times where we would like come back and like check in on that, and then we would stay separated. And so finally we got to this decision of, if this is the person that we both want to live with, grow with, and continue this process where, and we both just got clear that like it just felt really complete for us in that way. And I think that honesty allowed us to, we have an amazing friendship now. And we're probably more close now than we were when we were married, which it's hilarious to some people, but it was because we both showed up for ourselves first and in complete honesty that we were able to really say that. And it's not that like, she's an amazing person. She's incredibly loving. She has a lot of the characteristics that I was looking for in that partnership, but it just, if I was attached to it being her face and her name, I would have continued to slightly manipulate who I was and not show up fully as myself. And she would do the same. And so that's a really hard thing to do. We had 10 years invested and a lot of commitment and love in that relationship. But both of us being on the other side of it are incredibly happy. I mean, I'm currently with a partner that is a much better fit for the person I am today. And I can say that with all the love in the world. It's one of the most challenging things as humans to navigate relationships, because we're dealing with a different being with different needs and a different phase of their journey and and those change too. So like, as we develop and as we become a new person, like that's asking a lot for someone to grow in the same ways and be on the same page 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later. I actually believe it's possible, but it requires us to have a commitment to ourselves, and also a commitment to expressing to our partners very clearly what we need, what we want, we desire, so that they can actually meet it. Because none of us can read those things. We can't read the minds of our partners. So,
yeah. Oh God, so good. What comes to mind for me as you say that is like, we get what we want or something greater. And sometimes it's not what we think it is, but we'll always get to that place, especially when the commitment is to ourselves and creating that life that we want for ourselves. And I could talk to you about this all day long. But to wrap this up, I guess, like, is there any last things that come to mind for you that feel important to share, or feel as though is like inspired through this conversation?
Yeah, a general thing that I like to remind people of, most people are aware of this at some level, but to remind yourself of, is that when you're talking about relationships with another person or any interaction with another person, it's not personal. The way they're showing up is a product of their learning, their experiences, their life, their traumas, their wounds. It has nothing to do with you. It's not personal to you. Now, that's one side. The flip side is you may be doing something to trigger those things in them. And you get to decide if that is actually the way you want to show up. And if it is, then like that person just has to be okay with learning how to be with their triggers. But them communicating things, them being angry, them showing up in a certain way, them maybe being hurtful in some way, is actually not personal to you. I like to remind people of that, because we can oftentimes get caught up in what other people are mirroring back to us, or they're showing up in, or they're saying, and it can change us. We can take it on as true. And depending on how much someone knows you and how much you trust them, there probably is threads of truth in it, but not 100% true. That's like, I think about it as like a braided rope. And these braided ropes are like every word that we say to someone is a braided rope. And that braided rope may be 50% truth of like what's true for you. And it may be 50% of my projections or my experience, my lens, my perceptions. And so you get to decide in every interaction, like how much of this is like gold threads of truth for me that I can learn from, and how much of it is their projections. But it's never a personal thing. That's been getting more like I'm sharing this more and more, especially with what's happening in the world, because things that are happening and the way people are behaving is not personal at all. Like the decisions that someone is making has nothing to do with you. And the more we can accept that in our daily interactions and in our most intimate relationships, the more fulfilled we will be with them, and the more we'll be able to get to loving communication and away from this like constant trigger, your trigger, my trigger, attack, defense, passive, aggressive. When we can get to loving communication, none of that shows up anymore, which I think is what most people want to get to in their lives. And it sometimes takes the person who's most aware to just own this isn't personal. I can hold them in this. I can show up as me. I can be loving and I can protect myself at the same time. And that takes a lot of responsibility where you're choosing to be in a state of love rather than choosing to be right. And that takes a lot of courage to do, but I invite everyone to do it. And the results are life-changing. You get to have the intimate, connected, loving relationships that you desire, and you get to transcend a lot of the games that we learn to play between each other. And when you can do that, you can actually create the relationship that you truly desire with a person that's willing to meet you in those things. And it's a beautiful journey. It requires a lot of self-reflection. It requires 100% responsibility, a lot of courage. But I imagine that if they're listening to the show, they can do that. They can handle that. They have the capacity for that. And so go do it. Yeah, I think that's it.
I love that. And for anybody who is listening that has resonated with like taking this next step of diving even further into understanding who you are, where you're at, how to lead from your heart, how to communicate from this place of love, I cannot recommend TCS, Training Camp for the Soul, that Chris is facilitator and the CEO of enough. That has been such a massive piece of my journey. So Chris, if you want to give us a little info on TCS, yeah. I'm going to drop everything in the show notes so that people can go check out TCS and join TCS. But I would love for you to just give us a little rundown on it.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. It's fundamental, life-changing work that every human, I hate to use the word should, but it would help you a lot if you did it.
They should.
I'm obviously biased, but it's what it does is it gives people an opportunity to write the life that they desire deep in their heart rather than just accept the life that they were handed. And by life, I mean everything. The way you think, the way you speak, the way you have relationships, the way you think about money, the way you feel about yourself, your own personal health and body, all of those things you learned and you just took on and adopted before you even knew you were making that choice. And we teach people all of those things that they learned as children, usually from 0 to 7, from mom and from dad, where they failed to learn, the gap in learning. And we teach them how to identify the ones that aren't serving them, to rewrite those stories and to create a new life around them. And it applies to any and all areas of life, and we attack any and all areas of life. And so no matter what you're struggling with, like I said, whether it's money or relationships or career and purpose or health and body or or self-esteem and confidence, or worth. Like it's all of those things. You learned to think a certain way, you learn to act a certain way, you learn to speak a certain way about these things. And so we just teach people very systematically how to rewrite those stories. It's incredibly powerful work. It works for everyone who does the work, and that's why it's what I call fundamental. It's fundamental to being a human. It teaches you how to parent yourself and take responsibility for your life, which there's nothing greater than that gift, in my opinion, when you learn how to really be the creator of your life. We teach people to do.
It's incredible. I can say I am 11 months out of TCS right now. Who I was 1 year ago when I started the journey with TCS is nowhere close to who I am now. And the things that I have been able to recognize about myself and change in my life since, from a place that feels sustainable and natural and long lasting, is beyond words. So like I said, I'm going to drop that in the show notes, the links to TCS, as well as Chris's personal info. So everybody who has loved this conversation and recognizes that they want to go deeper, this is it. Go deeper with them. It's incredible. And Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for all of this conversation. It lit me up. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And thank you, Kat, for having me. It's great to hear you. You look great. I'm glad you're living your dream. It's so exciting to see and hear. And this has been an amazing conversation. You're great at what you do. So thanks for bringing it out in me. And I hope this was helpful and supportive for your listeners.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I'm so grateful to have these no bullshit talks with you. If you enjoyed today's episode or the podcast as a whole, please spread the love by leaving me a review on iTunes or sharing the podcast with others. This is how I will be able to spread more of these good vibes and be able to make more of an impact on the lives of others. And if you're not already part of all of the goodness and communities that I have to offer, check out the show notes. I have links to the different ways that I can support you on your manifestation journey and help you live a life full of more money, fulfillment, and freedom. But that is all for now. So big love and hugs, and I will chat with you soon, babe.